Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Perry, to Gar Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it! Into Booker. Here's the three. Suzanne! Oliver, Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Whammo time! He got it! Suzanne! Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less. This is a podcast about the Phoenix Suns and the NBA. My name is Max McCauley, and I'm joined as always by my co-host. His name is David Nash. David, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Max. I hope you and all the listeners had a good holiday period. It's been a weird week of Suns basketball with us both being quite busy over the period, but lots to talk about.
We're going to do two things today, David. We're going to first start with the recent Suns games. We're going to use each of the games as sort of like a launching point into a discussion we want to have.
Yep.
So we'll touch on some big topics. We'll talk about Ayton, obviously, based on what he did yesterday versus the Nuggets. We'll talk about Holmes and Oubre sort of out of the Washington game. We'll get into some rotation stuff out of some of the other games. So it'll be fun. We're going to get into a lot of different Suns topics. And then we're going to move on to more of a around the league thing. We're going to talk about fake Xmas games for next year. You know, we're in the holiday spirit still, David, and we want to make up some fun Christmas games.
Yeah, and I'm excited for this one. I think I've mentioned on the pod before, it's the day after Christmas, which we call Boxing Day here, when all the Christmas games air from about 5:30 in the morning all the way through the afternoon, one by one. So I've been a little bit disappointed with the scheduling in recent years, so we're going to try and fix that to our own taste today, I think.
I went freaking nuts on mine. It's just bug nuts, so you won't be disappointed with mine if they actually happen, I promise.
Okay.
Okay, before we get into it, David, how about recap the last couple of games so we can use them as launching pads and some Suns talk?
Yeah, as we said, it was a pretty weird week. We're back to our one win per episode rule there, Max. But apart from that, with one win and 4 losses on the calendar since we last recorded, it's kind of felt like a positive week still on the back of that mini stretch. So since we last recorded, there was the huge overtime loss to Washington, 146-149. The back-to-back loss to Brooklyn, 103-111. Then we got the win over Orlando, 122-120, also an overtime game. Then the loss to OKC and Denver in back-to-back games as well, Max. So the record currently sits at 9-28, unfortunately, which is last in the division, as we keep saying, but 11 games behind Sacramento, which is just crazy. Last in the conference, 7 games behind the Pelicans, are the surprising 14th team at the moment. And we are equal 28th in the league with none other than the New York Knicks, who might come up a little bit later in the Around the Associations segment, Max. But we're 1 ahead of Cleveland at the bottom of the standings, but we're 5-5 through the last 10, Max. So that's the little positive spin to put on the overall record situation.
Yeah, and as you sort of touched on, even though they've kind of been bad record-wise in the last 5, and they're obviously really far out of the playoffs and really behind a lot of teams, it still feels encouraging. A lot of what we've seen lately, they've been losing some games in more encouraging ways than they were losing them earlier on.
I think they've definitely turned a corner. I think we're going to delve into some things why they've definitely turned the corner, and then probably some reasons why we're still going to get some bad games every now and then just because of how the roster sits, which is probably a really nice segue to jump straight in, Max.
Yeah, let's do it. So we're going to start with the Denver Nuggets game happened yesterday, and obviously, David, the story there was Deandre Ayton.
It was, and as we alluded to, we've both been pretty busy over this period, and whilst we've both watched all 5 of the games from the week, generally it was just one of us watching it live and one catching it up on replay. So I'm taking the lead on this one as I was watching that Ayton game as it was going. Being the holiday period, I almost turned off after one, but I'm glad I didn't, because that second quarter by Deandre Ayton was pretty incredible. A franchise record 24 points in a quarter, and it really seems, like we were alluding to before, with players and teams turning a corner, it really seems like Ayton's turned a corner here, Max.
24 and a quarter was a franchise record. Really, Booker never beat that?
Sorry, I should say by a rookie for the franchise. I think it was the 6th highest in all franchise history, and you are right, Booker was slightly ahead of that. But my question to you, Max, is, as you know, we're both positive Doncic fans on this pod, and learning to love Ayton. I've probably jumped in a little earlier than you, but I know you're even turning around on him. But is the Rookie of the Year race back on at all, Max?
I think it absolutely should be. The numbers Ayton's been putting up lately are kind of godlike. You see some comparisons from people on Basketball Reference, and the names that pop up are like Shaquille O'Neal, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, guys like that. Like, he's doing some absurd things. I think I saw today that he is second in the entire NBA, only to Giannis Antetokounmpo in finishing around the rim.
That one is definitely correct. Yep.
Yeah, and it's just showing off what. So back up here a little bit. One of the reasons why I include myself in this, and a lot of people who were following the draft were a little bit worried about Ayton. Were they worried that he didn't have like an elite offensive skill? Really, he was really good at a lot of different things, and obviously an athletic freak. Mm-hmm. But he didn't really show off the dribbling. The shooting was okay, but it wasn't like out to way out to deep or anything like that. So the passing was fine, but not excellent. There was no like really elite skill, which usually modern NBA centers have.
Yeah.
But what Ayton has shown in spades so far is that his elite, freakish, supernatural, unbelievable touch is his elite skill. Like, it's just uncanny how he can finish around the rim from all angles, no matter what. It's allowing him to score so efficiently in the offense without taking a lot of possessions or anything like that. And it's turning him to a crazy good scorer already, which I don't think anybody expected him to do things like this. Like, I would have not said he would have scored 34 points all season, David.
Yeah, and the touch, as you said, is the one thing that's really hanging out at the moment as that elite skill, as you said. The ones where it really stands out are those really quick lobs where he manages to catch the ball and put it through the ring. And, they're generally shots that you see big man with lesser touch kind of clunk off the back of the rim and things, because, catching it all in one motion and getting it through the ring is just not something that big men are all that great at doing. But he just seems to do it with ease and almost every time, which, as you said before, he's finishing around the rim better than everyone in the league other than Giannis.
The other two that he's just insane, are the jump hooks go in. I feel like it goes in every single time. I don't think I've ever seen him miss a jump hook.
Yep.
And then also, when he's under the rim, when he's shot under the rim, he still finds a way to score. It's crazy.
And if it's not straight through the net, they're still finding a way to bounce around and go down, which is, again, just speaking to that touch. But these last 5 games that we're touching on, Max, he's averaging 21.8 points on 70% shooting, 14 rebounds with 6 offensive rebounds, 2 steals, and 1.4 blocks. Now, I've seen quite a few people point out who he was playing in those games and that it's a small sample size, etc., etc. But if you kind of take it back to 12 games where the weird Portland situation went on with his, benching / illness sort of scenario, you still get 18.8 points on 64%, 12.7 rebounds with 4.7 of those being offensive, and still get the 1.1 steals and 1.3 blocks. So this has been going on a little longer than just the last week, Max, and I think it's a bit of a change in role for him, particularly when Devin Booker's come back into the lineup. He had 10 offensive rebounds against Denver, only 4 defensive ones. So he's not just hoovering up defensive rebounds, he's making a legit impact on that end. And the assist ratio stuff is down. So he's not passing as much up from the elbow. He's not touching as much from the elbow. And his unassisted field goal makes are up as well. So he's kind of less reliant on everyone around him too. And he's just going and eating himself off putbacks and things, as you've said. But seems to be a real emphasis on just running from rim to rim for Ayton. Have kind of simplified his game a little bit. And I wonder whether that kind of does match up with Booker being out. I think they were obviously down playmakers when Booker was injured and they tried to use Ayton more. But now that Booker's back and everyone's kind of healthy, they've been able to maybe get Ayton back to the role that they wanted to play him in all along.
Well, It's great because nothing I hated more than when they'd put Ayton out at the elbow or wherever, and he would just like stand with his back to the basket and just have no idea what to do and turn the ball over half the time.
Yep.
It was so stupid. And the way they're using him now makes so much more sense. And I love that you go back to the Portland game because I want to bring everyone back to, this was not that long ago. This was, 3 weeks ago? When Deandre Ayton basically quit after the first quarter. He admitted it because they were down. And he's like, there's no chance you come back in the NBA. And now, and yesterday we have him down, whatever they were down to the Nuggets, 20 points into the first quarter. And the only reason they came back in the second quarter and made it a game was because Deandre Ayton's effort. What a change.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that, Max. That's a great point. And as you said, only 13 games ago that happened, which is just, such a great way of spotlighting, how much development he still has and how things can change very, very quickly throughout this season.
It's remarkable. And one other thing I want to talk about is people are still leaning on this thing. I see it on Twitter and other places where, great offensive performance. The guy still doesn't play any defense. Listen, he's not the best defender in the world still, obviously, but he's just so much better than he used to be already. And people also try to compare him to Enes Kanter. Dude, it doesn't make any sense. Enes Kanter is just awful in every phase of the game on defense. Ayton, even if he never gets any better on defense, right now is better at it than Kanter because of his movement skills and his length. The way that guy contains guards is you see guards get him on the perimeter isolated and don't even try to challenge him, David. That doesn't happen. Bigs always get challenged on the perimeter.
Yeah, and it's the big thing that with him that we've said all along is that's the way that he can potentially stay on the court in big games and impact games. Yeah, he's still got a long way to go on making reads and becoming a good kind of weak side help defender at the rim. You kind of hear guys... I heard rewatching the Denver game, I think it was Booker kind of after an easy layup for Denver kind of yell out, protect the rim to the big fella. So, they're really on him about that and he's definitely getting better at it. But yeah, he shows, great movement with his feet. He's showing way more activity on that end in this, last little kind of 3 week stretch. And, the defense has definitely come along and, while block numbers aren't everything, they're definitely up and he's getting robbed of quite a few blocks too, which I'm seeing a lot of people get upset about on Twitter. The one thing I will note about that is I'm almost 99% sure that those stats actually come from, the home team scorekeepers most of the time and then can kind of be revised by the NBA officials after. So if you're getting mad, particularly while Phoenix are playing at home, you should be getting mad at the team for not crediting him with those blocks and looking out for them.
I've actually been mad in the past about the fact that the Suns don't grease the skids on that as much as other home courts do. Like sometimes, I forget who used to be back in the day. I think it might have been Chris Paul in New Orleans, but there was this one hometown advantage. They would just give them ridiculous assists to guys.
Yep.
And the Suns have never done that. It's always made me sad.
Happened a lot in OKC too with Westbrook trying to average his triple-double.
I mean, Westbrook would probably stare down his own team's scorekeepers for not doing it. I don't blame them. I did want to get into a little bit of... I know we're doing Orlando later.
Yep.
But, I mean, we're touching on Ayton's defense now. So, what do you think about his overtime performance against Orlando? Because that was like viewing the future of what actual Deandre Ayton defensive monster could look like.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to touch on Booker probably more so with the Orlando game later. So, good to bring that up now. I think that was a game that I didn't watch live. So, I kind of saw everybody's reaction to that and everyone being quite down on Ayton having probably one of his worst games in this little stretch during regulation in that Orlando game. But, all I'd probably say on that is probably two things. I mean, one, they're the kind of plays that I've been hoping DeAndre was going to start to make for this team. I've probably been more vocal on this podcast than I have been on Twitter about how high I am with Ayton as a defensive guy in the future, mainly because I just don't want to get caught in any ridiculous conversations on Twitter, Max, and would rather bring them up with you here.
Right.
But the other thing that I loved about that was Holmes after the game going straight to Ayton and probably the bench's reactions. I think that big block that he had really high off the backboard, the whole bench, including all the assistant coaches, were on their feet as soon as that block happened. And that's just like, a huge sign of a sigh of relief of like everyone kind of getting really excited at Ayton doing what they all know he can do. And you see that. That's why guys haven't got on him too much. That's why there have been negative comments in the press after games, is because I think they probably saw in training camp and see in practice us, every off day what this guy is actually capable of, and they're just waiting for it to come out on the court in important moments. And that was probably the first important moment on defense for Deandre Ayton, and he shone.
I'm right there with the coaches and the players, everyone who's standing up, because you know me, David. I've said in this podcast so many times, I care to an extent, but I don't emphasize athletic gifts as much. I care more about whether the guys are good at basketball and whether the guys understand how to play basketball. Mm-hmm. And to see, I don't think it was ever a guarantee that Ayton was going to figure things out, and it's still not a total one, but the fact that he's already starting to figure things out, like in the past couple of weeks, how much better he's gotten, so encouraging. Like, you can't get more encouraging than what he's doing lately. And I'm going to do a quick little re-rank here. I'd still have Luka number 1, but before I had JJJ in his own tier above Ayton, I think you got to put Ayton with JJJ now. What he's shown, they're at least next to each other for me.
Yeah, no arguments here. I've always said that I've got Luka 1A and Ayton 1B, and the only two guys that deserve to be picked at number 1, and I'm not changing that either. They've always been in the same tier for me, and Luka has been out of this world, so no reason to drop him behind. But that's no slight on Ayton. I'm very, very excited for this guy, and as I said, watching that game on replay or live via Twitter, I think, all the fans stood up from the bench, as you said, because it was the first time that we saw him really affect the game. And in terms of development, I've said it on this pod all through the summer, is the greatest thing about developing rookies is if they have some skills that they can contribute on the floor right away, then you give them a chance to get max minutes and really make strides, because making strides on the court in the NBA is where you're going to see the biggest quick leaps. And what Ayton is doing offensively is allowing him to stay out there and affect the game defensively, which we're also seeing with guys like Melton and Bridges. For all their flaws, they are being a positive on the floor in some aspect, and that's where we're going to see the other things kind of come along with reps.
Yeah, and before we go to Washington, I just very quickly on Bridges, just because you brought him up. Like you said, I watched the Denver game later, so I actually just got done watching it an hour ago, and I was surprised there wasn't a little more raving about him on Twitter. He was really, really damn good in that fourth quarter. That one play he had, the three-pointer he made to bring it within 3, where he just casually, calmly steps behind the three-point line and drains it. That was something out of him.
It was, and as I said, I hung in there and watched the whole game, and I was really impressed. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of fans kind of switched off, and then their kind of knowledge of the rest of the game was probably just Ayton's highlight package and stuff. And that's not, I'm not taking a shot at anyone. It's the holidays. People have better things to do after a, 20-point deficit in the first quarter. So, I think Bridges really shined through in that fight back. And, the last couple of games, he's doing exactly what you expect. He's hitting threes, even though there is still some hesitation there, which is annoying. But he's also picking up a couple of steals, a couple of blocks, multiple deflections, and really affecting the game that way. And it's encouraging to see with Bridges. I'm still very high on him. I think that was a great kind of ancillary piece to add to this young core going forward.
Yeah, and I don't know how much to believe these stats. I'm always a big skeptic on defensive advanced stats, but there are some systems that have him graded as the best perimeter defender on the wing in the NBA right now. I don't know about that, but I do think he's not getting enough credit for what he's doing on that end.
Yep, and that's going to long continue with Booker, Ayton, and everyone else on this team until they're a winning basketball team, Max, for all our frustrations about what some general NBA types say about our team. The kind of cold light of day is that we're not going to get the credit, or they're not going to get the credit until they become a positive on the court, which hopefully is coming sooner rather than later, Max.
Well, the next thing we're going to get into is a little bit about how that maybe could become possible.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about the Washington Wizards game, which, was obviously a ridiculous game. It was crazy. The 3 overtimes, the questionable coaching decisions. But we're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to talk about, it was Kelly Oubre Jr.'s homecoming.
Yep.
David early on going to Washington. And he's been a little bit off lately, but I don't know about you. I'm still very high on him and his fit on this team. And obviously I'm also very high on Rashawn Holmes. But David, both those guys are free agents.
They are. Kelly is restricted and Rashawn is unrestricted, but bird rights on both of them given that we traded for both. So
And also, Rashawn Holmes is basically restricted because his mom's going to restrict him here because she loves it here, right?
I think she loves anyone who shows love to her son, which the Phoenix Suns fans are definitely doing at the moment, which is great to see.
Yep. So I think a lot of people are wondering, like, are we going to be able to keep both these guys, particularly Oubre, because Oubre might be, as a big wing who has, can walk and chew bubblegum, is going to have a lot of value in the market.
Yep.
So we got to look at, like, how are we going to handle our cap going forward? Because, next offseason, we can probably have, So, David, you're the cap expert. You tell me. But I think if with the cap hold of Oubre and Holmes, which are going to be about $12 million total, if we stretch Ryan Anderson, we get to 30-ish?
Yeah, I've kind of got the 3 levels for you here, Max. So as you said, Oubre's cap hold is $9.6 million. Holmes is $1.6 million. So the two of them together round out at about $11.2. So your 3 kind of options here, there's obviously multiple other options, but the 3 that I'll kind of lay out all to do with Ryan Anderson's contract is you either keep Anderson on the books and his full kind of $21 million salary, and you're going to have about $14.8 million. That's with the cap holds of Oubre and Holmes. You can cut Anderson and his salary will only be $15 million. So you open up more like $20.4 million. Or you can cut and stretch Anderson, as you said, which basically takes his $15 million and puts 5 of it for the next 3 years against the salary cap, and then you open up kind of that 30.8 million-ish amount. I will say that none of those amounts include wherever our first round pick lands, right, or roster charges for having less than 12 guys on the roster. But when you're projecting this early around these things, I personally don't like bringing those things into the equation because you just don't know if the Suns are going to trade their pick or whether the pick's going to be number 1 or number 10, particularly in these new lottery odds. So that would have a huge bearing on what the total number ends up being. So yeah, they're kind of your 3 options, and you're really 15 million, 20 million, and 30 million. So it gives them a lot of options to keep both Holmes and Oubre, use their cap holds to advantage, and add some real talent to this team, which, as we said, is kind of where this team should be going towards if they want to start getting credibility in the league.
Yeah, 100%. And not only does the draft pick affect the how much cap space you have, which, as you made the good point, it affects it a lot. Say they get Zion, I think if they get him, they're not going to be as interested in keeping Oubre just because, they can only play so many guys in that sort of biggish wing position.
That's a good point.
So, David, here's kind of how I'd approach this, I think. Assuming we don't end up with Zion or something that makes us not want Oubre.
Yep.
I think I sign Oubre to a contract as long as I think it's, not absurd. And I think my limit would be, maybe 18. That's where I'm cutting it off. Mm-hmm. Because with the cap rising, I think that a forward of Oubre's kind of type it's so valuable that almost no matter what, unless he just totally tanks, he's going to be tradable on a contract like that. Say he signs a $15 million a year deal for 4 years, which I think is very, very possible.
Yep.
And say Bridges, Jackson, and TJ Warren are all working out great for you, and there's no room for him. I'm pretty sure you can trade that deal because NBA teams just need wings. And especially if you're going to include a pick, that's the kind of thing, oh yeah, of course we'll take Oubre on. So I think almost certainly I'm keeping Oubre unless, like I said, Zion or somebody makes him, redundant.
Yeah, and the shorter that you can keep the contract, the kind of more north you might be able to go with the dollar figure as well. I think Oubre's around 24, so, he might actually be interested in only signing a 2-3 year deal to kind of get back on the market in his prime at 27, 28 and kind of sign one more long-term deal. So, there's obviously conversations to be had there. The thing that I'd say is the way for people that kind of need to understand this a little bit more, the way that you're doing this with the cap hold is, the cap hold amount is just the amount that goes against your salary cap sheet, and then you can pay them over the cap any more than that up to their kind of max if you want. So someone like Rashawn Holmes, who's 1.6 million, is a massive advantage because that's all that counts against your cap in terms of trying to manage the dollar figure and the salary amount, but you could pay him $8-10 million a year. I will note that obviously requires the Suns to go into next season as an over the cap team, which our ownership has not really done in the past. But as we were alluding to before, there's a real advantage and way here for the Suns to put a really, really competitive team on the floor next year. And this is how you would be able to do it, because you can, keep Ryan Anderson and maybe even keep him to trade as an expiring contract, which I think is another thing worth noting, Max. You don't just cut him for the hell of it, because he might be the last big kind of salary on the books that you're willing to trade to get something like a starting point guard or something in, and you can still have $15 million to play with to sign, a Mirotic type that we've brought up on the pod before, and then, as I said, trade Anderson plus picks and assets for your point guard of the future, or you open up more space and kind of look to sign multiple players. But, as I said, Oubre is someone that, I've kind of floated how the rest of the year goes is probably anywhere between 12 and 20 million. And then it's just all about the timing of it all. You hope someone like Rashaan you can agree with on day one, but then you basically make it official as the last signing for the Suns.
Yep.
And then Oubre's a little trickier. You kind of, he can sign an offer sheet elsewhere to kind of force your hand a little bit, and then you're on the clock with 3 days to match or let him go. But again, you could agree to a figure with him that he's happy with, and then kind of make that your last 2 signings after you've gone and signed.
And David, I'll point out real quick. I don't know if you saw, I quote tweeted Brendan Clean, who was sitting near courtside and heard Kelly Oubre telling a courtside fan.
I did see that.
You saw that? He said, hey James, referring to James Jones, tell him to keep me in Phoenix.
Yep.
So apparently he's happy here.
Yeah, and saying those things is a very good thing for a restricted free agent to say. But he's showing it on the court. As you said, he's been a little up and down, but his role's also been a little up and down. You've got to think that joining the team during that huge away trip means that he's still a little behind on knowing schemes and things like that. I'm still not ruling out that they insert him into the starting lineup still at some point.
I think they should, man. I really do.
Particularly if you're going to look at signing him to kind of a $15 million contract, you probably want to see him in the starters to see what his absolute max output with this starting group could actually be before you, sign him long term. But yeah, as we're alluding to here, there's a real chance for the Suns to add both a power forward and a point guard in free agency or trades, plus keep Oubre and Holmes. And that's where you start to get a really deep, talented team for next year.
Yep. And another point I wanted to make with this whole discussion is, people often ask us questions about, like, well, can the Suns keep Oubre? Can the Suns keep Holmes? And the answer is always like, yeah, but there's like a million contingencies, and who the hell knows what's going to happen? It's hard to project these things. There's just so much that can happen.
It is. And probably the last point that I'd want to make on that is the bringing down of Ryan Anderson's salary to match exactly what Brandon Knight was making is a pretty surefire sign that the Suns had been planning for a long, long time around certain monetary figures for this summer and didn't want to waste all that planning by bringing in someone like Anderson on kind of $6 million extra. So the fact that they managed to get Anderson to agree to exactly Brandon Knight's salary if he came to Phoenix, if they waived him, is a pretty surefire sign that they're maybe looking at that kind of $20 million or even $30 million option if they stretch Ryan Anderson to bring in a real top-level talent. And then again, you could bring the top-level talent in and sign Holmes and Oubre, and then, all of a sudden you're really kind of working max.
Yeah, but again, also, like I said with the Zion point, if you bring in Kevin Durant, just to name the number one guy, you're probably not going to want to keep Oubre.
Yes.
We need him anymore.
Yeah.
So, it all depends. We'll see. It's going to be interesting to monitor this going forward. But Dave, let's kind of refocus on the present and the near future. We want to talk about Devin Booker and his All-Star chances. We're going to start off the Orlando game where, Booker was having a pretty good game, most of the game, and then, at the end of the fourth quarter just went absolutely nuclear and should have won the game by himself, if not for some questionable reffing,
Yep.
I would say. But anyway, I won't get into that. But just generally, I want to talk about how Devin Booker has become, by the advanced metrics even, one of the better offensive guards in the league. I think he's the best shooting guard by offensive RPM right now.
Yep.
And that's before, and those were old numbers. That's before he's had kind of like a nice few games in a row. So I expect him to be way ahead. Defensive improvement, I think, is really there. He's actually trying consistently on defense now. It's a night and day in my opinion. So David, we kind of want to talk about like, is he gonna be able to make the All-Star team? You've been taking a little bit of a look into this, and it's more possible than we might think.
Yeah, and as we said before, this was another game where you were watching live and I caught it on replay. And, it's the kind of game, even though it only was against Orlando, it's the kind of game that starts to get attention, which, you can put the stats together that Devin Booker has, and I'll rattle those off in a minute, but you kind of need those big moments and you need wins. He's not going to probably make the All-Star game if they're sitting on, 9 to 10 wins still halfway through January. So that's going to be part of the equation, is this team continuing to get better and get wins on the board. But for the whole season, if you look at his stats, Max, he's kind of 25.3 points per game on just 45% from the field, 7.2 assists, which is pretty ridiculous, but only 32.2% from three. So on the surface, pretty great numbers. But if you look to since he returned, and we're going to say the first time this season that he's actually been 100% healthy, he's averaging 29.5 points per game on 47.5% shooting, 5 rebounds, 8.3 assists, 1.3 steals, and up to 34.5% from three, Max. So that's in the last 8 games.
And real quick, David, before you go on, I still don't feel like he's playing that well.
It's pretty crazy, isn't it? I think you've noted on Twitter a couple of times, and a few other people have as well, particularly after the Denver game. I think there was a lot of fans that thought that his final stat line was, maybe a little generous to him in how he actually played. But that's a great sign of a great player, is he's probably still got another leap to make, which is important, which is what I'll say next, is before we jump into the All-Star conversation, the final teams will be chosen around the end of January. So he's kind of got another month of games to continue this streak and really build his case for an All-Star game. So if we look at last year's guards in the West, Max, I want you to tell me who of these guys is still guaranteed a spot.
Okay.
Stephen Curry.
Yep.
James Harden.
Yep.
Russell Westbrook.
Yep.
Damian Lillard.
Yep.
Klay Thompson.
No way. I don't think there's any chance, unless he goes really nuclear from here on out.
And another one who is no chance because he's now in the East is Jimmy Butler. So they were the 6 guards. I don't think Devin's going to be lucky enough to be classed as a forward in the voting. So he's going to have to take one of those guard spots. So that leaves, at the moment, based on last year's guards, that kind of leaves 2 spots up for grabs, as you've said. I would argue that maybe even Westbrook doesn't deserve it, but he's going to get it. He's going to get it just because of his name. So here's his competition, and I want you to say who, at this point in time, definitely beats Devin Booker out for an All-Star spot.
Okay.
DeMar DeRozan.
I don't think it's definite, no.
Drew Holiday.
Not definite. I think I'd lean towards him right now, but no.
CJ McCollum.
I don't think... hell no. That would be ridiculous to put him with Booker, in my opinion.
Mike Conley.
Not definite, but I'd probably lean his way.
Donovan Mitchell.
That was my answer.
Luka.
So I think Booker deserves it ahead of him, but if I was going to guess on who gets it, I would lean towards Luka.
And your man, De'Aaron Fox.
Same exact answer. I think Booker's been better, but Fox would get it, probably.
So, in summary, that means 2 spots are up for grabs, we're saying, and I very much agree with your answers, and that currently no one definitely 100% is ahead of Devin Booker for one of those 2 spots, Max.
No, and I think you made the key point there when you're talking about how the whole month of January coming up. Booker needs to make it impossible not to put him on the All-Star team in this next month.
Yep.
He needs to just go crazy. He needs to have, actually, like we said, we don't think he's been playing that well. He needs to actually play well as his new form, Devin Booker. Because he's been playing badly as new form Devin Booker. I want him to play well as new form Devin Booker. He needs to have a 30-10 assist month kind of thing where it's just like, oh yeah, this guy has to be in the damn All-Star game. And I think he's capable of it. And like you said, the competition is not the same way it was before. It's not impossible for him to make it, and I'm hopeful. That's probably what I'll be watching for the most over this next month.
Yeah, I mean, if he averages 29.5 and kind of 8.3 assists as he has for the last 8 games over January, and the Suns kind of go, 500 in that time, then, he's going to get the attention that he deserves, and he's definitely going to be in the conversation. I've got in my notes, which I think is on the back of what you said, with there being quite a few, not so definites, but that would probably edge him out at this time. I'm thinking injury replacement.
Yep.
I think that, he's the kind of guy that may come in if there's an injury to the West, and we might see some players start to, really big up his chances as well. Obviously, with the captains who pick the teams now as well, it'll be interesting to see who captains each team and whether somebody wants Devin Booker on their team.
Yeah, I kind of feel like they would, because NBA players seem to love Devin Booker. They love guys like Devin Booker who are just like who can score from anywhere and just like badasses on the court.
Yep.
NBA players always overrate those guys. It's why everyone loves Jamal Crawford. So I think that it would go really high. But anyway, David, why don't you take us on to the next game? OKC. What do we have to say about that?
OKC was another one that I got to watch on replay kind of without emotion, Max, and I would definitely probably agree with your takeaway or main takeaway from the game, and that's that Jamal Crawford kind of shot the team out of that one over his little kind of third quarter, fourth quarter stretch. And it kind of got me thinking, Melton really struggled to start the game in that one as well. And, there's still a real question and cloud hanging over this team with that position and what to do going forward, Max. And, what did you think about, or what do you think about Crawford in the rotation at the moment, I guess, through the lens of that game in itself? And what about your boy Melton as well?
Well, here's my question. Is Crawford still in the rotation? We saw him just disappear in the second half the other night. I wasn't watching it live like you. Was he hurt or was he just bandaged?
No, I think that was probably the first sign, at least recently, where we've seen him come in and do exactly what we're talking about, shoot the team out of it, not play within the scheme, and not give the ball up. And Igor, flat out benched him for a Kobo. And,
Yep.
With the team, I don't think that change really was the kind of catalyst for the team kind of coming back the way they did against Denver, but it certainly doesn't help Crawford that they went on a huge run.
Well, when did they go on the run though, David? It was not when Okobo came in. It was when Okobo left and Melton came back in the fourth quarter.
That's very true too. So it's more to do with Crawford not being on the court than who was on it, perhaps.
And Melton, he made like a silly foul towards the end of the game, although he got very close to poking the ball away. But he was pretty good in that fourth quarter. He wasn't excellent. The thing about him is he's still offensively limited.
Yep.
He makes some threes and he bricks it horribly sometimes. And he doesn't really run the team very well, but he's still probably their best option. Obviously other than Booker at that spot. So he should get the majority of the time there. And I understand Suns fans being frustrated with him. The OKC game, he was not good, but that's going to happen with a rookie.
Mm-hmm.
And the funny thing is, and someone called me out on Twitter for this, Gibby, Brian Giverman, about how I was so anti-Austin Rivers, and Austin Rivers is kind of, in a lot of ways, exactly what they kind of need is that next guard. But, basically what they need is Austin Rivers, if you take out, his entire personality and, everything about him, mentally, and just have a guy with, that skill set, that's what they need, and they don't have it right now. And I don't know if they're going to be able to get that before the trade deadline.
Yeah, I'm not even sure with that, to be honest. I just don't kind of buy into that. I think the only reason that you would shift Melton down, hopefully, to the backup point guard position and Crawford, essentially out of the rotation, more of a kind of emergency break glass type player in certain games if you need a bucket or something, is if you got a real true traditional point guard, particularly if it was a short term for the rest of the season option. If it's not that kind of a player, if it's more of an Austin Rivers player that you're choosing between, I'm kind of all for Melton continuing to start. That's kind of my big question here is how do you weigh up Melton's development versus a stopgap option and the team getting wins going forward? And
so let me clarify real quick. I don't mean that Melton should be displaced as the starter. I mean that they really need a guy who can be in those Jamal Crawford minutes.
Yeah,
who's actually okay at that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a fair point. Again, probably more about Crawford getting off the court than Melton getting on it or anybody else. But I want to go back to your point on Melton's defense and getting called for fouls and things. I was talking very quickly to our good friend Coles Wicker last night on Twitter, and he was kind of pointing out that he still doesn't quite know what the Suns are even trying to do schematically right. In terms of defense. And I think it's a good point. I think anyone who watches the Suns pretty regularly can kind of point that out. And my response to that is just their best defense at the moment is just absolute chaos in the midst of being very, very good offensively, and they kind of get teams back on their haunches through great offensive play and easy buckets, and then guys like Oubre, Melton, and Bridges can really ramp up the pressure on the defensive end, poke balls away, get deflections, and you're going to get kind of touchy fouls in those situations, particularly when someone like Jamal Murray's already gone for 40.
I love that point you just made, because I'm going to cite something Eddie Johnson said last night when Melton had his foul call on that poke around, and Eddie Johnson's like, I wish they would have just played like solid fundamental defense there. And my thought in my head was like, the Suns aren't good at that. They're only good on defense when they're making like crazy pressure plays and gambling.
Exactly.
That's all they're good at right now.
Yep, and that's all the good defense we've seen over this week, and the little stretch that they've done is just absolute chaos on that end. And that's what you're going to have to do when you've kind of started 3 rookies. And that's probably why it was very disappointing that they didn't bring that energy from the start in the Denver game. I kind of pointed out on our 7 plays thread that it probably had more to do with offensive execution and then them kind of dropping their head on the defensive end. But just to kind of round that out and maybe tie in the Brooklyn game as well, Max, I think we're still lacking a bit of depth. Igor seems to be settled into his 9-man rotation, as we've touched on a few times in previous pods, and that's kind of getting the best results out of the team from a consistency basis, because we're not seeing different guys come in and out and they can all kind of get familiar with each other, particularly the first and second unit. But both Melton and Crawford are averaging 31% from the field in these last 5 games of the week, which is just pretty bad. Obviously, Melton brings you some other things. Crawford brings you, basically nothing else, which is making it even worse to keep him on the court. But Igor doesn't have a lot of options for all the negatives we've seen towards him for his rotations and things. He doesn't seem to trust anyone outside of that.
Well, David, hold on. I want to insert real quick here. In the Orlando game, when Crawford didn't play, Igor's rotations were fucking perfect.
Yes, and that will probably bring me to why I'm tying in the Brooklyn game. He kind of mentioned after that 3 OT game against the Wizards that the rest of the bench needed to be ready. He then followed that up by only adding Daniels to the rotation and not really shortening the minutes of too many guys at all. And I'm a little concerned about that kind of going forward. The last 8 games, Max, and this is skewed by a couple of crazy overtime games, but Booker's averaging 38 minutes, TJ's 37.3, Mikhail, who's a rookie, is 35, and Ayton is 32.4. If that continues for long stretches for the rest of the year, particularly given one of those is Devin Booker, who has his own health concerns all the time, and 2 of those are rookies in Mikhail and Ayton, kind of worried about A, their health, and B, just their productivity going forward. And we kind of need a bit more of a talent injection into this rotation. And it kind of just, it leads me to the kind of final question here, Max, and it's, do you still look for deals at the deadline to kind of finish off the rest of the year, or do we just keep going all in on youth and not care so much that the results may vary because of that?
Both, sort of. I don't think you go all in, like trade your first overall pick without any protections on it, sort of all in.
Yep.
But I do think they should still be looking for deals because, like you said, you don't want to be overextending these guys. Although I'm not worried about Bridges playing 35 minutes a game. That's fine with me. I am concerned about Booker and TJ. Those minute totals are too high, particularly Booker. I think they need another guard pretty badly just to settle things down a little bit, because if you notice this team, they'll play really well for like 40 minutes of the game, and then the other 8 minutes will just be a complete catastrophe.
Yep.
And they'll lose so much in those minutes. And if they could just even that out a little bit and just not, hemorrhage points for 2 or 3, consecutive. I think for Suns fans who watch the Orlando game, that's the best like indicative of this trend where they were like, it was like a tale of like 7 different games where they go on these awesome stretches and then they completely hemorrhage points for 10 minutes. It was crazy, and I think that's a result of what you're saying. These guys getting tired. They don't have bench people to go through other than Crawford, who's terrible. And right, I think that I would try to do is I would try to trade the Milwaukee pick. And maybe the first overall pick if they could protect it really severely, and maybe try to get some sort of a guard. But man, people just aren't looking to trade guards right now, David. Who would you even target in that scenario? Yeah,
I think you're probably coming back to all the same teams that we targeted early on in the year, and maybe more so some of the cellar dwellers or potential playoff teams. Teams like Indiana, Brooklyn again is another one. Teams that have multiple guards, they may be. The Clippers is another one. They may be willing to let someone go around the deadline.
Well, and then the issue is, and I've heard this point made on a lot of general NBA podcasts, there's just not very many sellers.
Yes.
Like, these playoff teams are trying to win, and we don't really have players to trade to help them win now that we traded Ariza. We really just have future assets. And I don't, like, for the Clippers, why would they want to trade somebody they think helps them, even if it's Beverly, who's not playing very much, but he's helping their locker room? Like, why do they trade that for picks?
Very good point, and one that we'll probably delve into around the trade deadline.
Yeah.
If no move has been made before that, because, you're probably looking more at teams down the bottom who are about to lose their point guards or aren't, interested in re-signing them that may give one up for a future asset instead. So that'll be an interesting conversation going forward. I think I pretty much agree with you on that. I think they've probably made the right decision up until now, given that they, seem to have been bent over a barrel for any kind of deals for point guards in the short term. And, they should just be patient, get minutes into these young guys, but eventually probably need to bring someone in, because you've been quite critical of Igor. I'm obviously a defender of Igor most of the time, but more than willing to point out when he makes some mistakes. And, I just don't think anyone really wants to play Crawford the 20 minutes a night that he's currently averaging, and because of, the results just aren't looking great. They've tried Evans, they've tried Okobo at short periods of time, and he played when Crawford was injured the other night, as you said, against Orlando, and the rotation was pretty perfect. So Crawford is standing out like a sore thumb at the moment in the rotation. Everything else is looking pretty good.
It'd be nice if Okobo were more like the offensive version of Melton, where like he was like actually pretty good on offense usually, but just terrible on defense, kind of like Melton, the other way around.
Yeah.
He's just really not yet, though. He's just not there.
Yeah, and he's very tentative on the court at the moment, and I think that's why they're kind of pulling him or not playing him, is that he's just not being aggressive enough, and potentially falling into that trap of just trying to run Igor's plays a little too perfectly. I think it was Summer League where Igor himself picked out that Okobo was kind of, and we talked about it on the pod, I think he was the most interested in running the plays rather than his own individual numbers, and that's kind of gone against him a little bit as the season's progressed. He kind of needs to just play naturally and to his own game.
Which I kind of felt like he was doing in that Clippers first half when he played so well. Didn't it feel like he was kind of just feeling himself? And I wish we saw a little more of that. But I do want to real quick just jump on Igor real quick, because I do think I've been too harsh on him. He's a rookie, just like a lot of the other guys are rookies, and we gotta put up with the growing pains. He's never been a head coach of an NBA team before.
Yep.
It's hard to manage the personalities and the egos. It's not the same thing as coaching Slovenia or Georgia when the countries that they want to play for those teams. Like it's tougher, and I've been too hard on him. I think he's a genuine offensive, I don't know if I'm a mastermind yet, but a really damn good offensive coach who has great schemes and knows what he's doing.
Yep.
And I think he's been, foisted a bad hand on him. He's been slow to adjust, but he's gotten to where I want him to get, especially if Crawford's actually out, like it looks like he might be. And so I just want to say, I'm fine with Igor right now, and I think that I still have faith that he's our long-term coach.
I think a lot of the criticism that you've made has been quite valid, I guess, to jump on the back of that. There's been other criticism of him which I haven't appreciated quite as much, which, then when it's all lumped in together, seems a little bit unfair on him. But we can definitely point out when he makes mistakes. But as you said, he's a rookie, which essentially means we're starting 4 rookies at the moment, if you include the head coach. And that's going to mean some growing pains. It's been a positive week and a positive couple of weeks. Unfortunately, they're not quite eking out the wins, but I think it's got to do with kind of more overall talent, as we've run through in this segment, rather than individuals not doing what they're supposed to be. Yep,
I think we totally agree on that. And I'm excited to see what Igor can do going forward when he gets the rotation streamlined with Crawford out. All right, Dave, we want to do Did You Know before we get around the league?
Yep, so Max, with the Christmas Day games been and gone, did you know it has been 9 seasons since Phoenix last played on Christmas Day? That's right, Phoenix last played on December 25 during the 09-10 season, after also playing the year before. Before that, though, you have to go all the way back to the 96-97 season for a Phoenix Christmas Day game. A 108-87 blowout loss to the Los Angeles Lakers, a team featuring Shaquille O'Neal as their young star, who had 26 and 16 in that one. Two young rookies played just 15 minutes between them in that game, though. One for LA and one for Phoenix. Any guesses who they might have been, Max?
Is that Michael Finley time?
It isn't.
Okay. 1996-97 Lakers. No, I don't know. Oh, is that Kobe?
Kobe's one, and think of Kobe's draft class for Phoenix.
Oh, Nash.
Yep.
Nash, yeah.
Two Hall of Famers, Kobe Bryant and Steve Nash. A far cry from the big minutes our rookies are playing this December, as we just discussed, Max. But back to that 09-010 game now. The Suns beat the Clippers 124-93 to bring their running tally on Xmas Day to 12-6 overall. Now, Max, the Suns team featured Stoudemire, who top scored, Nash, who topped the assist column, and also Grant Hill, while LAC had Rasul Butler top score for them and Baron Davis the top assist guy. Eric Gordon was their only current day player who logged minutes in that game. But Max, Phoenix had 4 players from the current day still going. Any guesses who they would have been?
That's the 2010 team?
Yep, I'll give you a clue.
Jared Dudley.
Yep, 2 are very much veterans now, while 2 were rookies at the time and now probably classed as vets themselves. So Dudley's one for Brooklyn at the moment.
Oh, man, I got to think about this. Channing Frye?
Yep, for Cleveland.
I don't want to hold up the podcast, so you can go ahead and go.
King of our pronunciation wars. I'm not going to say his last name. Goran is playing in...
Judge. I can't believe I forgot him. That was the year that he did the Spurs playoff thing.
And yeah. Robin Lopez, who's currently in Chicago. Now, I'm
not mad at myself for forgetting him.
Now, I mentioned Shaq and the Clippers for a reason previously, Max. You have to go all the way back to 92 for the Clippers' last Christmas Day game before they returned in 2009. And a big reason they returned, Max, was because they went 19-63 the season prior and landed the number 1 pick. Although Blake Griffin sat out the season, they still landed a Christmas Day game for that season. In 08-09, the terrible season, the Clippers lost back-to-back games to Phoenix in February. The scores were 140-100 and 142-119.
Jesus.
For Phoenix, these were the only games where Alvin Gentry was coach, Shaquille O'Neal was at center, and Amari Stoudemire was at power forward. In fact, Gentry had just taken over the Phoenix Suns from the fired Terry Porter on Feb 17 and drew the lowly Clippers in a home-to-home back-to-back. A team that Gentry was the coach of before the current coach of that time, Mike Dunleavy, took over. But alas, Stoudemire went down with a season-ending eye injury on Feb 20, and the Suns never really got to see what Gentry, Shaq, and stat combo could do. So Max, with Terry Porter fired 4 months into his first season with the Suns, I'm hoping Igor can make it past Feb 17 in his rookie season. I'm also hoping the addition of a number 1 pick who happens to be a big man might mean the Xmas Day hiatus is over soon for Phoenix, or maybe we'll have to land another number 1 pick too, Max. But that's it for this week. But if we keep going, we're going to talk about Christmas Day and that theme a little longer with our Around the Association segment.
I think you're reading my notes here, David.
Well, why's that?
We'll see. You'll find out in a second here.
All right, let's do it.
All right, David, let's get into it. Like I said earlier in the show, we are going to kind of lay out our preferred Christmas schedule next year. Maybe not even preferred, like dream, maybe the word for it, at least for mine. I don't know yours.
Yeah, dream's probably better to describe it, as it's probably got absolutely no chance of all 6 of these games getting up, and that in itself, because generally there's 5 games on Christmas Day, but we've extended it out to 6, Max.
Yes, and I'm telling you right now, with the players that I'm going to have on these teams, there's a 0.000% chance that this is possible. But so here's what we're going to do it. So David's going to do the East, I'm going to do the West. We'll start with David. What is your first early morning East game, David?
So early morning East game, there's the kind of top 4 teams by consensus at the moment, Max, are Toronto, Boston, Philly, and Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. The 4 teams who actually played on Christmas Day this year were Boston, Philly, Milwaukee, and the Knicks. So we also get the advantage of the 2 extra teams with 6 instead of 4. So I'm going to right 2 wrongs here, and I'm going to go with Toronto versus Brooklyn for our first East game. And the reason for that is Toronto deserves a game on Christmas Day.
Yep.
And Kawhi is going to stay with that team. The Knicks don't deserve a game on Christmas Day, and I'm going to say Brooklyn beats them out in free agency and therefore also beats them out on Christmas Day. And, I'll throw up a random name like perhaps Kevin Durant to go up against Kawhi Leonard on Christmas Day.
That's fun. I like that. That's a good idea.
Yep, so that's our first early morning game in Canada. Toronto versus Brooklyn, Max.
I like it. I'd watch that game, I think. I would definitely watch this game, David. So I saw you contemplate on Twitter the possibility of Dallas and Phoenix playing next year.
I did. Again, dreaming again. But
so here's how it could happen. So no one really knows what Kawhi Leonard wants, David. He's really a weird guy. Maybe he just really loves the EuroLeague and is fascinated with Luka Doncic. He's like, I want to go play with that guy. So Dallas would finally land a big-time free agent. It's Luka Doncic. It's Kawhi Leonard, David.
Wow.
And not only that, they keep their pick if they get a good draft pick, David. So they got the second overall pick in this scenario. They have RJ Barrett in their team.
That's a kind of dream case scenario summer for Dallas.
It is, and they're going up against another team with a dream case summer. The Phoenix Suns not only still have Booker and Ayton in their team, they got their one overall pick, David. They have Zion Williamson.
I like it a lot.
And as you'll hear later, Anthony Davis is no longer on the New Orleans Pelicans. He wanted out, and no reason to keep Drew Holiday anymore. Drew Holiday is along with Zion Williamson on Phoenix, David.
Now you're talking about my ultimate dream scenario. We all know that I have been on the Drew Holiday bandwagon to Phoenix for quite some time. So,
absolutely.
I'm all in.
We got Zion versus RJ, the Duke reunion. We got Ayton versus Luka, the ones on each side. We got Kawhi Booker, some budding stars. It's a good game, David.
I like it. And as I said, the games start pretty early, but I would wake up at any time to watch that game, Max. So I like that one a lot. Should I go on to the third game of our schedule?
Let's hear it.
So the top 4 teams by record this year, Max, include the Indiana Pacers, who were probably nowhere near getting a Christmas Day game. And by Joel Embiid's own admission, Philly and Boston is not a rivalry because Boston keep kicking the hell out of them. So Indiana needs a game. Embiid and his team need a new rivalry. So I'm going with Philly versus Indiana. Okay. But there's an added extra bit of flavor to this. I think for Embiid to get a true rivalry, he needs a true big man rivalry one-on-one also. So I am saying that DeMarcus Cousins has a successful return from injury, wins a title with the Warriors, and then signs with Oladipo and the Indiana Pacers.
I love that idea. Although they're going to just figure out what the hell they're going to do with Turner and Sabonis, but I like that idea.
They do, and obviously we're just going dream case scenarios here, but the big...
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to point out any holes, David, because just wait till the kind of holes you can poke them in.
Yeah, but I think that the main point of that is I think for Embiid and Philly to get a true rivalry, a Christmas Day type rivalry, he needs a big man to go against, and the Boston one doesn't quite live up to that hype.
Can you imagine the attitude in that if DeMarcus Cousins is back to where he was?
There'd be a lot of ass slapping down the court like we saw between the two of them.
That'd be great. All right, I'm gonna go on to my next one here. This one's cheating a little bit because I'm gonna use an East team because there's not enough West teams for me. I just need to cheat, but so this is I was mad this year, David, that they didn't put the Lakers and Boston together on Christmas Day.
Yep.
I thought it was stupid. Why not reunite that? You have LeBron versus Kyrie now. Like, why would you not do that? So I'm going to have LeBron versus Kyrie on Christmas Day. Not only that, Boston traded for Davis because they have the assets. So this is Kyrie, Anthony Davis, Jason Tatum against LeBron, Damian Lillard, who I guess for some reason Portland decided to trade to the LA Lakers.
Yep.
And Klay Thompson, who, as you'll see in my next one later, Golden State blows up, and they're going to lose all their players. So I want to see like a really star-packed LA versus Boston on Christmas Day, and that's the most star-packed one I can think
I like it. It is very much dream scenario. You've stolen my thunder a little bit, so I'm going to throw back to you here, and I'm going to make you give your last game before I give mine, so I can pivot to a different team for my last matchup, Max.
Sorry, you can still use Boston. That's fine.
Come on, give it to us anyway. Give us your last one.
Okay, well, as I said, but this scenario happens when Golden State they lose in the first round because they all hate each other.
Yep.
It's a total blow up. Like all those personality problems, those actually realize themselves, and it's a problem.
Yep.
And so here's what happens. This is This is OKC versus the Clippers. Kevin Durant decides he wants to go to the Clippers because he wants to be in LA but have his own team.
Yep.
But his good buddy James Harden, also his team flames out, and Houston's like, we can't pay this contract. So the Clippers somehow are able to trade for Harden and sign KD in free agency, and that's the team, right?
Yep.
They go up against the Oklahoma City Thunders. You got the Russ KD rivalry still. You got Paul George. You got Steven Adams. So the Russ KD Harden that speaks for itself.
Yep.
But not only that, David. Golden State's blowing everything up because Clay and KD both left. Mm-hmm. They trade Draymond Green to OKC. Because OKC's just like, let's just pack it up. Defense. We want all defense. You get KD against Draymond, who's the one who drove him away from Golden State. You get KD against Russ. You get Harden against Russ. It's just like, I can't think of a game that would just be more awesome to watch than that.
And that OKC lineup is just kind of filthy dirty with Russ, Dre, and Steven Adams, who doesn't go out of his way to be dirty, but always somehow ends up in weird scenarios. And maybe we'll see Draymond kick Steven Adams in the nuts on his own team on Christmas Day.
That can happen. I know for sure we'd probably see the first ever NBA team forfeiting to a team they have to go up against Draymond and Adams.
I like it a lot. Well, I'm going to pivot then. You've obviously alluded to Golden State potentially blowing it up, and I'm going to say that must have been after losing in the final, so we'll just wipe them out of Christmas Day altogether. I can't imagine a Christmas Day without James Harden, as much as some people seem to hate him play basketball, which to me is just crazy. So forget all the other players on the team, but we're going to go Harden versus Giannis in a Houston versus Milwaukee matchup to round out our series of games, Max.
I like that. I don't know if I can't recall a Harden-Giannis game before, but you feel like that'd be a really fun one to watch.
It'd be super fun, maybe just, by that stage, two teams that are, pretty much centered around their one guy. No super teams here, literally just one-on-one Harden versus Giannis and two powerhouses of each of their individual conferences, hopefully still at the time, because I don't see Harden going anywhere, even if Paul and things never come back to full health, and Giannis is going to keep dragging Milwaukee along with him, I think, Max.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Man, I really want to see Giannis with another superstar to see him. That'd be so fun to see, but it's hard to imagine how that could even happen.
Yeah, it's just hard anyone choosing to go to Milwaukee as well, I think. So definitely hard to see that one happen. But here's the recap of our 6-game schedule then, Max. We've got Toronto versus Brooklyn to kick it off. We then have Dallas versus Phoenix, which will make all the Suns fans listening happy. We've then got Philly versus Indiana with an Embiid versus Cousins rivalry. Boston versus the Lakers in the primetime slot, which would be a huge rivalry even without all the players that you threw into that one. We'll then go with Houston versus Milwaukee, and rounding it out with the late night game, probably going to end in some sort of brawl that means some kid's not going to have his father there on Christmas night, instead in hospital, with the Clippers versus the Thunder, Max.
You took that way more seriously than I did. But I do want to say, I think the Lakers in Boston, it was a crime they didn't play on Christmas this year, and they got to do that next year. I don't understand why they're not hyping that up. It's Kyrie versus LeBron.
That's true, and it's Boston versus the Lakers. Maybe just trying to stick to conferences too much, which, doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense if you're going to be away.
Well, they used to do Miami versus the Lakers in the old days. Remember that? I don't know why they're not doing that anymore.
So if you're going to be away, it doesn't really matter that you're on the same coast as where you're from, really. So, let's get back to some traditional rivalries and creating some new ones as well.
Yep, I totally agree. All right, David, should we move on to 7 seconds or less?
Let's do it.
7 seconds or less is this segment where one of us asks the other 3 questions for which the other has 7 seconds or less to answer and has not prepared. David, this week it is my turn to ask you questions. Are you ready?
Always.
So this is gonna be tough, David. I'm gonna give you some hard ones. They're gonna tear your heart apart. These are like, which Suns player would you rather keep on your team? All 3 of these are that.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's not gonna be fun. I'm sorry. I apologize. I'll answer 2 just so I'm not being unfair. Okay.
Okay, and I will just say before we start, anyone listening, throw us your answers as well on Twitter. And when you're listening to the episode, we like to hear from other people as well, particularly if they're specific Suns questions.
Yeah, I think this is a really good one for Twitter because everyone's gonna have opinions on these and they're gonna be hard fought, I think. So First one, David, keeping long term. Would you rather keep De'Anthony Melton or Kelly Oubre Jr.?
Ooh, that is very tough. I'm big on kind of looking at your starting five in the championship team, and I think they're all in on Mikal. I also think that probably means that Oubre doesn't hang around, and I'm still high on Melton as a long-term prospect. So I'm going to sneak into 7 seconds and say De'Anthony Melton.
I agree with you. He's just, if he pans out, he's perfect with Booker, and he's kind of a more unique player type just to be with Booker, so I agree. They get a lot harder, David. So this one's tough. Ready?
Let's do it.
Mikal Bridges or T.J. Warren?
Not as hard as you might think. I am all in on Mikal Bridges.
Okay, I agree. T.J.'s just been so good from 3 this year. I think a lot of Suns fans have kind of turned his corner, but I'm with you on that. I just thought it'd be harder for you.
I'm just really high on Booker and Ayton as a combo, and you're going to get all your points that you need there, and I just love Bridges, and that's why I love that move by the front office as well.
Yep, I totally agree with you. So, but I definitely saved the hardest one for last time. You can probably guess what the last one is.
I think I know what's coming.
Yeah, it's Deandre Ayton versus Devin Booker, David.
All right, I thought this might be coming. It might take me a little longer than 7 seconds to explain.
That's fine. You can take a while on this one.
I'm sticking with Devin Booker purely because he has the runs on the board, Max. But I am very, very tempted to say Deandre Ayton for a couple of reasons. One being health. I'm a little bit worried about Booker going forward, and Ayton has shown no signs of bad or ill health, at least just yet. And I am just really, really, really high on Deandre Ayton's ceiling going forward. And I think there is a chance that at one stage in his Suns' career, while Devin Booker's still on the team, that Deandre Ayton is the number one option on the Phoenix Suns, Max.
Yeah, I don't think that's crazy. You sound like you're like one more Orlando overtime away from switching your answer on this.
It's a lot. I will say it's a lot closer than probably a lot of people would say right now.
His contract's better too.
Yeah, and that matters. I was going to say that with the Melton Oubre thing. I'm not saying Melton's a better player than Oubre right now, but when you're about to have to pay Oubre $15 million versus De'Anthony Melton $1 million, it means a bit.
Yeah, and so listen, my answer's Devin Booker. I'm not as high on Ayton as you are, as a lot of Suns fans are, but I'm starting to see the argument for Ayton now. Finally, for me, it's just that the way that the game is now, to have a movement shooter who can also play make. Basically, if Devin Booker pans out, he's James Harden. Yeah, and I don't think if Ayton becomes like the best defender in the league, it's possible he has that value. But it's hard for me to see DeAndre Ayton having like Devin Booker's peak value. And that's why I'm going with Devin Booker.
Yeah, I think it's a perfectly made point and is probably the right move. You've reminded me of when I brought it up, probably a month or two ago now, in terms of Phoenix's best trade asset. Sometimes the best way to look at these things is, who would get you more in a potential trade, and that's where things like contract and things come into play.
If you trust Bill Simmons at all, which I think a lot of people don't, I think he had Booker at like 17 or 18 on his trade value column and Ayton at 22, so it was close, but he had Booker slightly ahead.
Yep, and that's probably the way it should be just for now, Max.
Yep, I think I agree. But anyway, I think that's it for us. David, you wanted to mention a few reviews before we sign off here.
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out to Scotty Coe, who I reckon is Scott Coleman on Twitter. Let us know if I've got that right, Scott. He gave us a review. We got 3 more 5-star ratings as well over Australia and the US, and we're itching forever closer to our goal of 55 stars on the US iTunes. So if you're listening and you haven't given us a review or a rating just yet, please do so, and we will definitely shout you out. But we're continuing our long 7-game homestand with just the Warriors and Philly to come to round out December, Max, which means that our next episode will probably be another monthly recap.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. Maybe we'll get a guest on for the first time in a while. We'll see.
Yep.
But anyway, yeah, as David said, please give us a review. It helps us a lot. Please subscribe. Please rate. As always, you can follow me at MaxMCC11 on Twitter. You can follow David at The 4 Point Play on Twitter. You can follow our podcast at 7SOL Pod on Twitter. David, thanks. This was fun.
It was, and have a great New Year, Max, if I don't speak to you before then, and everyone listening as well. Have a safe and happy turn of the year, and Max and I will talk to you in 2019.
Yeah, you'll be there before us, so let us know on Twitter how it is.
Thanks, guys.